Good morning. Today we're going to start a new unit on decimals. We're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals. But before we do that, we need to learn the basics. How do you read decimals? And what is a decimal? How can we show it? So today we're going to be reading decimals and we're going to be modeling decimals using the decimal grid paper that hopefully if you're at home you picked up, or otherwise I'll give it to you today, or otherwise hopefully I gave it to you on Friday. All right. So the first thing to understand about decimals is that they are smaller than a whole. Here's our place value chart. Usually what we've already done is here, right? We have our ones place, our tens place, our hundreds place, and our thousands place. And we know every time we move to the left from the ones to the tens, or from the tens to the hundreds, we're getting 10 times bigger, right? This is base 10. Everything's based on 10. So the hundreds place is 10 times bigger than the tens place. And on the other hand, the tens place is 1/10 of the hundreds place. So if we go to the left, we're getting 10 times bigger. If we go to the right, we're getting 10 times smaller. Now, if we keep going to the right, past the ones place, we pass this decimal point, and now we are in decimal territory. We're talking about numbers that are less than one part of a whole. So the first number we encounter after the ones place is the tenths place, then the hundredths place, then the thousandths place. And the same rule applies. As we move to the left from the thousandths to the hundredths to the tenths, we're getting 10 times bigger, right? The tenths is 10 times more than the hundredths. And on the other hand, if we go to the right from the tenths to the hundredths to the thousandths, we are getting 10 times smaller, or the hundredths are 1/10 of the tenths, the thousandths are 1/10 of the hundredths. So getting smaller. Now this is confusing because over here, the hundreds place is bigger than the tens place. But over here, the tenths is bigger than the hundredths. All right, and I'll explain this in a minute. So how do we read these numbers? So in this case, we have 3/10. There's a 3 in the tens place. It's just 0.3, right? So that means, oops, sorry, one second. So that means that we have 3/10 here. All right, what if we added this 2 here? What do we have now? Now we have 0.32. We would call this 32 hundredths, right? Because the 2's in the hundredths place. Now what do we have? Now we have 0.325, or 325 thousandths. All right, what if we had a hole in here? What do we have now? Now we have 1.325, or 1 and, we say and for the decimal point, 1 and 325 thousandths. So what does that mean? We have one hole, and then we've got 325 thousandths of another hole. So 1 and a little bit more. Let's see what this looks like. So this is one hole. If we have a square, it's the whole thing. We're just going to call that one hole. But this square can be split up into parts, right? What if I don't want the whole pie? I just want part of the pie. Well, the first thing I can do is I can split that whole into tenths. And that means that we're going to take this whole and we split it into 10 equal pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each one of these slivers we're going to call 1/10. That's how you would write as a fraction. And to write as a decimal, you'd write sorry, that's my point, 0.1. So that's 0.1. If we add them all together, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 0.10, or 1 whole. All right, so how would we show this? How would we show 4/10? 4/10. So this is what you guys are going to be doing a lot of today. So how would I show 4/10? So 4/10 means I'm going to shade in 4 of these tenths. So there's 1/10, and I'm not going to shade them perfectly just to save time. There's 2/10. There's 3/10, and there's 4/10, right? So that first number that comes after the decimal point is your tenths place. This tells you how many tenths to shade in. So I just showed 4/10. Let's move it up to the hundredths. So now I've got hundredths. So what I did here is I still have my tenths. If you see, you still have these vertical lines, right? If you ignore the horizontal lines, you still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I still have 10 tenths, but what did I do to each of those tenths? I split each tenth into 10, right? And I got hundreds. So look, this tenth has now been split into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th has been split into tens, and what's 10 times less than a tenth? 100th. So I actually have 100 boxes here, and this is telling me I need to shade in 27 hundredths. So I could just count out 27 boxes and shade them in. That would be 27 hundredths. Or I can be a little smarter here and I can look and I can see, all right, well, how many tenths do I have? Remember, this first number after the decimal point is my tenths place. I have 2 tenths. So I'm going to shade in 2 tenths. So there's 1 tenth, 2 tenths. And now, how many hundreds after that do I have to shade in? 7. So let's see, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 27 hundredths. If I counted them all up, I would count up. So I got 10 here, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 hundredths. Okay? Now, what if we split each of these hundredths into tenths? Into 10 equal pieces, then we would get thousandths. So now you can see in each of these hundreds boxes, I'll zoom in a little bit, in each of these each box is a hundredth, and now we split each hundredth into 10 equal parts. And so each of these little lines is a thousandth. And if we were to count up all the little lines in this whole thing, we would end up with 1,000 of them. All right, so let's shade it in now. How would we shade in? Let me just move this up a little bit. How would we shade in 622 thousandths, or 0.622? So I'm not going to count 622 of these little things. That would take way too long. What I can do instead is I can take it piece by piece. I got my tenths place here, my hundredths place, and my thousandths place. So I'm just going to take it one number at a time. How many tenths do I need to fill in here? I need to fill in 6 tenths. So let's do that. There's 1 tenth. Maybe I'll change colors here so you can see it a little better. Yeah. There's 1 tenth. 2 tenths. I'm going to pause it so I can shade that in better. Okay, so I just shaded in 6 tenths, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I count how many thousandths that is, that would be like 600 thousandths, right? If we counted all these up. So I shaded in 6 tenths. Now let's move on to the next number, the hundredths place. How many hundredths do I have? 2. Remember, each of these little boxes is a hundredth. So there's 2 hundredths. And now, finally, I'm going to move on to my thousandths place. How many of those little things do I have to shade in? 2 of them. I got 2 thousandths. So actually, I'm going to have to make my marker a little smaller here. And I'm going to shade in 1, 2. I think that's about 2 of them. Yeah, that's 2 thousandths. Okay, so what do I have here? I've got 622 thousandths. I have 6 tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down, 6 tenths. I have 2 hundredths, 1, 2, and then I got 2 more thousandths. So if we were to count up all the little thousandths that I shaded in, there'd be 622 of them, or we can break it up. Okay, so that's what we're doing today. We are modeling these decimals. Try the problem, look at the notes, and then try the problem of the day on your decimal grid. All right, we'll be using this all day today, guys.